Değerli misafirlerimiz, muhterem hanımefendiler, beyefendiler, IRCICA'nın düzenlediği bu konferansa hepinize teşriflerinizden dolayı teşekkürlerimi sunmak istiyorum. Merkezimiz Alman Kültür Merkezi ile beraber bugün çok önemli bir konuda çok değerli bir bilim adamının konuşmasını dinleyeceğiz hep beraber. Profesör Bessam Tibi, çağdaş konular, İslam dünyasının çağdaş konular hakkında önemli araştırmalar olan bir bilim adamıdır. Kendisi aslen Suriyelidir. Şam'da 1940'ta doğmuştur. 73 senesinden beri Göttingen Üniversitesi Uluslararası İlişkiler bölümünde öğretim üyesi olarak çalışmaktadır. 88 ve 93 yıllarında Harvard Üniversitesi de öğretim üyesi olarak çalışmıştır. Birçok Arap ülkesinde, Amerika Birleşik Devletleri'nde, Princeton'da, Ann Arbor, Michigan vesaire gibi ünlü üniversitelerde çalışmıştır. Asya ve Afrika'da araştırmalar yapmıştır. Bu arada Sudan'ın başkenti Hartum'da, Uganda'da, Kamerun'da hocalık yapmıştır, profesörlük yapmıştır ve Kahire'de de El Ahram Merkezi'nde de çalışmalar yapmıştır. Kitaplar arasında Çağdaş İslam'ın Krizi, 1981'de birinci baskısını yapan bu eser 3 defa basılmıştır ve 91'de 3. baskısını yapmıştır. 92'de Kökten Dinci Tahrik adlı bir eseri, 94'te Komplo adlı bir eseri ve Allah'ın Gölgesinde İslam ve İnsan Hakları 94'te, Frankfurter Allgemeine Zeitung gazetesi, Der Spiegel dergisi ve birçok uzmanlık dergileri ve medyada bu konularda konuşmalar yapmıştır. Kendisi bu konferansı bizim burada verme arzusu ve bu hususta Alman Kültür Merkezi Direktörü Doktor Kurşaf bu husustaki nazik teklifi bizi memnun etmiştir. Çünkü bu konu fevkalade önemli bir konudur. İslamiyet ve demokrasi. Tabii ben Profesör Tibi'nin bu husustaki düşünceleri peşinen bilmediğim için bir şey söylemek istemem ama hepimizin bunu dikkatle ve zevkle dinleyeceğimizden eminim. Konferanstan sonra bazı soruları da sorabiliriz. Simultane tercüme olacaktır. Şimdi müsaadenizle Profesör Tibi konuşması yapmadan önce Alman Kültür Merkezi Direktörü Müdürü Profesör Kurşap'ı davet edin. Buyurun efendim.
Sayın Profesör Ekmelettin İhsanoğlu, Sayın Profesör Binaz Toprak, sevgili Profesör Basam Tibi, değerli konuklar. Bu konferansa Goethe Enstitüsü Türkçesiyle Alman Kültür Merkezi adına hoş geldiniz demek isterim. İslam Konferansı Teşkilatı Başkanı Profesör İhsanoğlu'na Boğaziçi Üniversite Siyasal Bilimler ve Uluslararası İlişkiler bölümünden Sayın Profesör Toprak'a değerli işbirliklerinden dolayı teşekkür etmek istiyorum. Profesör Tibi halen Ankara Bilkent Üniversitesi'nde konuk profesör olarak görev yapmaktadır. Teşekkür ederim Profesör Tibi.
I am grateful for, I'm sorry for not being able to address you in Turkish, because, I mean, all I know of Turkish is just few words for expression, gratitude, and being touched by, I mean, politeness of Turkish people, but unfortunately, I did not learn Turkish, and so I hope for your indulgence that my presentation will be in English. My point of departure in this presentation is the present situation in the world after the end of the East-West conflict and after the end of the Cold War. People have described our age as the age of the westernization of the world, not only the age of the end of bipolarity, and the end. There's some music coming out of this, yeah. Okay, thank you. Okay. So I think I don't need no music as a chorus for my lecture. So the term de-westernization of the world does not only refer to the fact that in East Asia, in particular in East Asia, some countries are coming up and becoming major economic powers. Some people argue that the economic center of the world will be in the next century, it will be in East Asia, and it will not be in Europe or in the West. I mean, this is a speculation. I don't want to address this, but there is another area of the de-westernization of the world which is pivotal and which touches on us, and I want to focus on the Mediterranean area, even though the paper that I will be presenting today, it is related to a presentation I have done 2.5 weeks ago in Jakarta in Indonesia. I believe there are two countries in the world of Islam. I am here as a guest of the organization of the Islamic Conference and also of the Goethe Institute, and I'm grateful to both. I want to express my gratitude for this. Among the 52 states which are members of the organization of the Islamic Conference, there are two states which cannot be considered as secular. They are both Islamic and secular, and they do not see in this a contradiction. I mean, Turkey has a long tradition in this, and the other country is Indonesia. I worked in Indonesia with Mr. Habibi, the Minister of Science and Technology there, and Indonesia is one of the countries to which I believe the future belongs. So the Indonesia is not only a secular state, but it also has a very remarkable rate of economic growth. It is a very successful country, and 2 weeks ago, Mr. Habibi was in Germany, and he made business with big companies in Germany for more than 10 billion Deutschmark. So, but here the issue, how to combine the idea of a modern state, the idea of democracy, of the idea of secular law, with a progressive understanding of Islam. Islam is our religion and also our civilization, and how to combine this and to make this as an example for other Islamic states. So the issue has to be addressed. I mean, since I'm here a guest of the Goethe Institute, and I'm also pursuing these activities within German Islamic relations, if you accept the term. I have been this in Southeast Asia, in Kuala Lumpur and in Jakarta, and continuing this year in Istanbul and also in Ankara. So the issue is, there is a conflict. This conflict is related to what we call the de-westernization of the world. The de-westernization of the world does not only touch on economic and political issues. It is not only related to the speculation that there is a decline in the economic and political power of the West, but it is also related to a very real issue. I mean, those of you, and I'm sure all of you follow this, in the present world, there is a challenge to the universalism of law, of the state, of the concept of rights, and the universalism that has been dominating for a couple of hundred of years in world politics and in international society has been a concept which came from the West. And so the concept of Western law, the Western state, and so on is being challenged by other civilizations, not only by the Islamic civilizations. So the idea of a clash of civilization as discussed by Huntington, I mean, we need to touch on it, and we have discussed it at length also in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur, that it refers to something real, and this something real is that there are different worldviews, and we have to acknowledge that people belonging to different civilizations have different worldviews, and also different concepts of state, of law, and so on. And this means that this conflict, which is a conflict in the civilizational worldviews, could develop to a political conflict, and as Huntington argues, it could become also a military conflict. I disagree with Huntington with this, even though I have been working with him at Harvard for more than 5 years. I agree with Huntington in the diagnosis. The diagnosis is there is a clash of civilizations, but I disagree with him in the prescription. His prescription, as an American a scholar who is consulting politicians, is to think about ideas related to how to defend the West. I am a Muslim. I come from a traditional Islamic Damascene family, and I live in the West. I am a German citizen. I am proud of my origin, but I am also proud of my German citizenship, and I want to combine both. And in this capacity, I try to mediate between the world of Islam and Western civilization. And in this capacity, I was also, a few weeks ago in Southeast Asia, and here in country, we are here at the hub of Islamic civilization, and we have to address this issue. So my prescription is, I agree with the diagnosis that there is a clash of civilizations. My prescription cannot be how to defend the West. My prescription is how to find some grounds, how to establish some grounds for coming together. And I have developed the concept of international morality. I have developed this concept in a book which I have published last year in German. The name of the book, Der Krieg der Zivilisationen, The War of Civilizations. And I mean by war not military war. I mean by war is the clash of worldviews which seem not to be compatible with one another, and then look for a concept of international morality. I have also published this concept in English last year in the American journal Human Rights Quarterly. And I want to present this to you, and I think democracy, my topic will be democracy. The focus of my deliberations will be democracy and human rights. So I think the democracy and human rights could be at the center of a concept of international morality. So people of Islamic civilization and people of the West, we say we disagree on this, and many other things. But there is a core issue on which we should not disagree, and this how to establish a state, how to design the law, and how to establish relations between people coming from different civilizations. I think the concept of human rights and the concept of democracy could become here a pivotal issue. And I want to add this also the concept of tolerance. Last year, I was mediating also while working for Goethe Institute. My work is at the University of Göttingen. I'm a scholar, but my connection with the Goethe Institute has become a part of my life. This is not flattering of Goethe Institute because I am not dependent from this institute, and so I need not flatter the institute, the Goethe Institute. But the issue is that the Goethe Institute considers a job as a bridge between the civilizations, and I have been elected last year as a board member of the Goethe Institute, and I presented when I'm making my inaugural lecture there, delivering my inaugural lecture. I argued also Goethe Institute could be mediators between civilizations and also mediators between culturally conflicting people. So last year I was in India within a project run by the Goethe Institute, and India, as you know, is a secular state, and India is a danger to become a second Bosnia. And I think if the things that are taking place in Bosnia could be repeated in India, that would be much more dangerous to the relation between the West and the world of Islam, and in terms of international security, because nuclear weapons are also here involved. So I've been mediating between the Hindus who are asking to switch secular India into a Hindu state, and this is a challenge to 130 million Muslims who are living in India as a minority. And so a peace between the Hindus and the Muslims and the Sikhs and other communities could only take place within a concept of pluralism, tolerance, and secularity. And I think this concept is not only a concept for peace in India or peace in the Mediterranean, it's also be a concept presented as a general one between Islamic civilization and the civilization of the West. So the basic contention of the following presentation is that Islamic and Western civilizations have different worldviews, and we have to acknowledge this, and this is simply a matter of fact. It makes no sense to say such differences do not exist. This is overlooking realities which are basic ones. So on the one hand, they have differences, while they, on the other hand, in our age of globalization, and I may add de-Westernization, are under pressure to come to terms and to find ways of peaceful coexistence. The issue is, how can we live together in peace? And this is, I mean, the question which touches on humanity at the turn to the next century. The means for this and for this end is the international and the intercultural dialogue between civilizations, and the framework should be the concept of international morality. And by international morality, I mean minimal consensus. I do not believe in universalism, and I do not believe in the concept of universal civilizations. If we take a look at the history of mankind, we'll find that the history of mankind was also a history of conflict between cultures and civilizations, but it's not only conflict, but also borrowing. So if we study history of Islamic civilization, Islamic civilization was also involved in borrowing from other civilizations. And if we look at our time, I think we need a consensus, and this consensus has to be related to basic issues, and on this consensus we can base the international morality. In my view, as a Muslim scholar living in the West, living between two clashing civilizations, human rights are the substance of international morality. In addressing the issue in this manner, we have to raise questions regarding the differences and then ask in that way how could it be possible to bridge the gap between the West and Islam. Not the West, I'm not talking here about Islam as a religion. Islam as a religion, and there are 5 pillars of our religion, and this is not, cannot be presented to discussion. I'm not talking about Islam as a religion, I'm talking about Islam as a civilization. And so the compromise is not related to the concept of faith, it is beyond the discussion, it is related to the concept of designing state and society, and how this could be brought into compatibility within a peace between clashing civilizations. So cultural diversities are not a novelty. They are as old as humanity itself. The history of mankind is equally a history of clashes and exchanges and borrowing and civilizations. It is impossible to figure out any human civilization would ever existed in an isolated manner, i.e. only in its own terms without cultural borrowing from others. And we Muslims, we could pride ourselves that our Prophet said, وَأَطْلُبُوا الْعِلْمَ وَلَوْ فِي الصِّينِ, and ask for knowledge even in China. And the Prophet said this knowing that China is not an Islamic place, so we can learn from others. And I think this learning, this is this precept that we should learn from others has been lost, in recent development of Islamic civilization. And so some people suspect learning from others would mean losing one's identity, and this is wrong. I was last year we had a big conference. Just to say this, I'm passing. We had a big conference at the Université Catholique de Levant about democracy and democratization in Asia, and it was funded by Japan. And the Japanese ambassador Sato, who opened the conference, he said, "You want to know our key to access why Japan, even though not Western, is now one of the leading industrial nations?" And he said, "Our key to success can we put just in one word, to listen with the mind of learning." He said, "We listen to others with the mind of learning, and this is our key of success." And that's why Japanese were able to adopt modern science and technology in the West and now emulate the West and become even better than the West is. Yeah? And I think we have this precept in Islamic civilization, but not all Muslims live up to it. Yeah? وَأَطْلُبُوا الْعِلْمَ وَلَوْ فِي الصِّينِ, and look for knowledge, search for knowledge even in China. So, I mean, it is true that the history of civilizations is not only a history of conflict, it is also a history of borrowing and exchanges. This is equally true for the West and Islam as well. In a way of introductory remarks to my assignment in this dialogue, the dialogue between Western and Islamic civilization, I want to clarify what is meant by culture and by civilization. Because in the recent debate, I mean, since Huntington published that article in 1993, so we have, I mean, it was published in a scholarly journal, but I mean, the debate is taking place in the media, in major newspapers throughout the world. Yeah? I mean, I told you I was about in the past weeks, I was in Southeast Asia and in Singapore, in Malaysia, in Indonesia. There's a big talk about Huntington. And when I mentioned in my lectures Huntington, so I mean it was in the first pages on the newspapers, and everybody knew. I mean, people who are not scholars knew what it's all about. Yeah. And then within this debate, there is a mix between culture and civilizations. So people use the concept of culture, civilization in a very confused manner and sometimes interchangeably. So I want to first to address the issue what is meant by the concept of culture and civilization, and then address the issue in point. The pertinence of the dialogue between Islam and the West for world peace after the end of the Cold War revolved around the issue that with the demise of artificial umbrella of world politics, i.e. the bipolarity and the East-West conflict, the true dividing lines among humanity have come to the fore. So I am teaching now at Bilkent University in Ankara in the Department of International Relations. I'm teaching courses for master students in theory of international politics, and my Turkish students were shocked when I said, I mean, you can throw out 90% of the academic literature in our discipline, because 90% of the literature in our discipline is phased out. If you look at the discussions in international politics, is about the conflict between the Soviet Union and the USA. This is bipolarity, bipolar conflict. And if anything happens in the world, be it in the Horn of Africa or Southeast Asia or wherever, they say this is an extension of the East-West conflict. Yeah. So the major issue is the bipolar conflict, then the superpower competitions, and even, I mean, your country is Turkey, was considered to be, I mean, a figure in this. The significance of Turkey in the Cold War was this is Turkey lies at the southern border of the Soviet Union, and that's why Turkey is strategically a significant country. And many people thought after the end of the Cold War you can throw away with Turkey because we don't need it. Yeah. But I mean, the conflict lies elsewhere. I have been teaching, I mean, for 20 years, I mean, in the past 20 years, that international relations is not only economy and politics, it is also culture and civilization. International politics is also intercultural politics, and we have to deal with this. And many of my colleagues, in particular in the United States of America, they said, we appreciate your work, however, actually, I mean, your work is not really international politics. Your work is cultural anthropology, Islamic studies. And now, I mean, in the past years, people do acknowledge that I belong to the international studies community, because the major conflict now in international politics is a conflict of civilization. And this has nothing to do with Huntington. I mean, this is a reality. Huntington is a very famous man, and he addressed the issue, and that's why the issue now came to the fore. So the clash of civilizations is not an invention of the Harvard professor Samuel Huntington, but a real issue that has to be dealt with, however, in a different way. Than the one suggested by my colleague, my revered colleague, Huntington. I disagree with him, and this is a nice thing in scholarship. If you practice tolerance, you say we agree to disagree, and then we maintain our friendship and collegiality. We need to acknowledge that civilizations have different worldviews, and then search for models and frameworks of peaceful coexistence.
an international morality of human rights based on cross-cultural foundations promises to be the best avenue. Let me explain in passing the difference between universal and cross-cultural. Universal is something, you present an idea, like any Western idea, and you say this idea is universal. So this idea is valid for the Africans, for the Chinese, for the Southeast Asians, for the Arabs, for the Muslims, and regardless of the cultural differences. And I think that's why I think universalism, I am not a postmodernist, I want to make this clear. Because postmodernists are cultural relativists, I am not cultural relativist either. For those of you who are interested, I published last month in the postmodernist journal Theory, Culture and Society, which is published in London, an article about knowledge and culture, and I argue there is something like universal knowledge, but there is no universal culture, there is no universal civilization. So if we need to establish a concept like the concept of human rights, if we say the Western understanding of democracy should be the Western the understanding of the entire world, and if you disagree with this, so you are not for democracy. You have a concept of human rights, and you say this is the Western concept of human rights, and if you disagree with this, you are violating human rights. Cross-cultural is different from this approach. Cross-cultural proceeds in this way, that you say, we Muslims, we Chinese, we Hindus, we Westerners, we are different, but we look at the avenues which bring us to some ideas which are compatible. So how could we establish democracy in a way acceptable to Chinese, to Muslim, to Indian people? And in my language, I use the term how to make Muslim people speak the language of human rights in their own tongue. So I am against imitation, not to speak the language of human rights in a European, West European, or an American way, but to put it in an Islamic way. But in the result, we come to the end, to the very same end. We say, we agree on this, however, the underpinning, the cultural underpinning has to be there. Elsewhere, the universalism of whatever idea is imposed. And if something is imposed, it is not accepted by the people. We live in an age of overwhelming globalization. And by this I mean we have globalization in economics, we have world economy, we have globalization in politics, we have the international system of the nation states, we have also globalization in communication and transportation, but we don't find this globalization in culture. Some people say, when I was in Jakarta and Kuala Lumpur and Singapore, I see Pizza Hut, McDonald's and what have you, and I see the same here in Istanbul. And so some people say this is world culture. And I think this is misleading. This is a fallacy. So, I mean, if a Turkish citizen drinks Coca-Cola and a Chinese drinks Coca-Cola, that doesn't mean these are the same people. I mean, they have different ideas, different worldviews, different beliefs. So this is a very shallow understanding of culture. So to reduce consumption to a culture. So there is no globalization in culture and civilization. There's a globalization in economy, politics, transportation, and communication, but not in the area of culture. People may drink Coca-Cola and enjoy McDonald's. I dislike McDonald's. I prefer kebab. But nevertheless, I mean, those people who enjoy McDonald's continue to be different. They do not become similar. So we are living in an age of overwhelming globalization. The international system of the nation states, the world economy, and the shrinking of the world through global communication and transportation systems. And this underlie the globalization process that I am addressing. Some people argue that the modern popular culture does function as a world culture. I contest this view. Videos and other items of culture, of consumption, do not bring people with different worldviews and outlooks closer. They don't bring them any closer. To search the goal, to reach the goal set in my presentation for bridging between cultures and civilization, people need to pursue a dialogue and a cultural, an intercultural dialogue between people belonging to different cultures and civilization. This is the way for bringing people together, and to make people drink Coca-Cola would not lead to world peace. Yeah, if you study, I've been studying regional conflicts in the 1980s in Africa. So like during the Shaba War. So the post-conflicting parties enjoyed Coca-Cola, but they were fighting against one another. So this Coca-Cola does not bring people closer. We need intercultural dialogue, and we need to do this seriously. So what are now cultures? I want to make a distinction between culture and civilization. Cultures are always local. My definition of culture is a local production of meaning. Cultures are an expression of the social production of meaning, which is ultimately local and could never assume a global framework. That's why I do not believe in a concept of global culture. It is for this reason that there can be no world culture. Consumption manners do not create a world culture in the world of Islam as well as in the West. There exists a great diversity of cultures, even in Europe. You see, when I travel and lecture, in the past 10 years, I've been doing that throughout the Islamic world, in particular in the Arab part of the Islamic world. And people talk about Al-Gharb, the West, yeah. And I say, but if you live in the West, you move within Europe, you find different cultures. Not to speak of the differences between North American Western culture and West European cultures. There are great differences. Well, maybe there's one Western civilization, but there's a variety of Western cultures, and the same applies to Islam. Alone in Indonesia, a country with 192 million people, there are 300 cultures. 300 cultures related to 300 different communities, and you have there 6 religions. Yeah? But all people, they feel they are Indonesian. They are Indonesian citizen, and they respect the cultural differences. So when it comes to Islam, there is one Islamic civilization. When I was in Indonesia, when I lived in Cameroon, I lived in Senegal. In particular in Senegal, 85% of the Senegalese people are Muslims. So I share with these people the faith and also the worldview, certain worldviews, but culturally we are different, because the culture that I grew up within in Damascus, it's much different than the Wolof or Tukulor culture in Senegal, or the many cultures in Indonesia. So here, my understanding of culture, it is always local, and civilizations are cross-cultural, they are regional. And I agree here with Huntington that there are seven basic civilizations in the world at the present. I don't want to list them now, but among these 7 civilizations, there are only 2 with universal outlooks: Islamic civilization and Western civilization. Islamic civilization is not only for Muslims, it is a universal civilization. Actually, so this is also the claim of Islam. It is a religion for entire humanity. I agree with this. But if you say this is also a concept of order for the entire humanity, even though I'm a Muslim, I disagree with this. Say, what is valid for the Muslim should not be valid also for others. And the same I may say of Western civilization, which also claims universality for itself. And this universality is being imposed on others because the West is now the strongest civilization in terms of science and technology. If you take a look at Hindu civilization, the Hindu civilization does not have a universal claim. The Hindu people, those who politicize Hindu civilization, they want to have an Indian subcontinent dominated by Hinduism. They want to have Hindustan as the Hindu state of India. They don't want to have a secular state there, but they do not claim this is valid for Russia, this is valid for Europe. But in Islamic civilizations, we have people who politicize Islamic civilization and say this is a universal concept, and the same is in the West. And this is the reason why both civilizations do clash. It is less, we find that this clash not there, with regard to Confucianism, Buddhism, Hinduism. So I want now to figure some areas of difference and also of accord, and then address the issue of democracy and human rights. So first, among the leading 7 civilizations in our current world, only Islam and the West, as I already have said, have universal outlooks and therefore do clash with one another. How can we limit this universalism to the point of making them live together peacefully. When I discuss, for instance, with Islamic fundamentalists who say, I mean, in Europe, who say, I mean, there can be peace in Europe only if Europe become Islamic, and some people say, I mean, they have the idea Europe should become Islamic, and I say, I mean, if you are a Muslim, then you must accept the authority of the Quran. And then people say yes. Then I quote out the Quran, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, وَلَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. You have your religion and I have mine. And the Quran also says, لَا إِكْرَهَ فِي الدِّينِ. And I interpret this as a concept of pluralism. I mean, I am a Muslim, but my religion does not oblige me to impose my religion on others. And this is a concept. If I do this, the result will be a conflict and a clash. So, I mean, to accept diversity, also diversity of religions. And this is, as I said, وَلَكُمْ دِينُكُمْ وَلِيَ دِينِ. My interpretation of this, that the Quran accepts that we have our religion and others who are not Muslim have also their religions, and we need to accept this. And I like this very much in Indonesia and Kuala Lumpur. So this is not only an academic view. Mr. Muhathir, the president of I mean, the prime minister of Malaysia, he says Malaysia is an Islamic country, but we have 6 religions, and these 6 religions are equal. And the very same happens in Indonesia, but Indonesia is secular. But in Indonesia, the concept of religion is we are a Muslim country. 90% of the Indonesians are Muslims, but 10% belong to other religions. But regardless of this proportion and the numbers, the concept is in our country we have 5 religions. The concept of Pancasila, we have 5 religions, and these religions are equals. So the others are not only dhimmis, they are, I mean, a Buddhist or a Christian or a Hindu is as equal as the Muslim is. And this is very important. This is, I mean, one way for dealing with the clash of civilization and how to limit one's universalism. We have to do this with our civilization, and we have to ask the West to do the same with its own civilization. So no imposition of American concept of democracy on the rest of the world. We look for our own happiness. We don't need happiness coming from Washington. Yeah? So number 2, in the medieval period, Islamic civilizations was able to accommodate a major source of Western civilization, i.e. Hellenism. Yeah? So I mean, the peak of Islamic civilization was between the 9th and the 11th century, when Islamic civilization was able to accommodate Iranian civilization, Hindu civilization, and the Greek rationalism, the falsafa tradition, and that was no contradiction to Islam at the time. So Islam has a historical record of accommodating non-Islamic civilization without conflict. And number 3, for a fruitful dialogue, it is imperative to determine those issue areas that split people coming from different civilizations, and also those others that unite. Political religion, i.e. fundamentalism, on the side of the Muslims, and cultural and political hegemony on the side of the West do not do separate civilizations. I think my understanding of fundamentalism, or my definition of fundamentalism is a politicization of a religion. And I have been a member of the American Academy of Art and Sciences, and we run at the American Academy of Art and Sciences in Chicago and also in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in the years 88 to 92, the Global Fundamentalism Project, and we detected the rise of fundamentalism not only in Islam but in all other religions, and not only in monotheistic religions like Christianity and Judaism, but also in Hinduism, in Confucianism, and in Buddhism. And in all these, I mean, the similarity between the phenomena in all these civilizations was related to the fact that religion has been politicized. And if you politicize religion, you split people. Look at India. The politicization of Hinduism leads to the rise of the BJP, the fundamentalist party in India, which claims that India is a Hindu state. But you know, in India, there's a minority. This minority amounts to 130 million people. And those people are Muslim. Well, how to do with them? And when I was several times in India. The last time, it was last October, I talked to BG people, and they said then those Muslims, they should go to Bangladesh or to Pakistan. 130 million people. But you see, if you accept the concept of the secular state, and if you do not politicize religion, if you look as Islam as a religion, Hinduism as a religion, if you accept the teaching of the great Muslim Sufi, I am not a Sufi, but I like Ibn Arabi, and Ibn Arabi defined religion as mahabba, the love of God. If I believe in a religion, I love God, and the love to God is not political. And he says, this is quote unquote from Ibn Arabi, from his writing Turjuman al-Ushuq. The Turjuman is the same in Turkish. The interpreter of the Ushuq is temptations, the interpreter of temptation. He says the religion as a love to God, mahabba, could be pursued in the mosque, in the church, in the synagogue, and also in the temple. That means he also acknowledged and accepted Hinduism. And this is, I mean, if you accept this concept, then there is no conflict. But if you politicize a religion and you don't look at religion as a love to God, but as a political ideology, then the result is a conflict, and the conflict would escalate to a war. And the best example for this, and it should be threatening, it is in Bosnia. We're having a conference about this Monday, Tuesday, and Wednesday in Ankara, and the president of the Turkish parliament will open our conference, and we present this. This is a scenario of war. And if you want to have a scenario of peace, then you have to depoliticize religion and seek elements which combine, which lead, I mean, to a peaceful coexistence between Christians, be they Catholic or Orthodox, and Muslims. So number 4, the most pivotal issue in this respect that I am addressing revolves around the idea of international morality, and I have been touching on this issue. And I argue that international morality is based on a minimal consensus shared by all civilizations. I do not believe, I wish this, I mean, if you see, I am, within international relations, I belong to the school of neo-realist. We have, I mean, there are many schools in international relations, but I mean, if I summarize them for a non-professional audience, like here, say, there are 3 tendencies. You have idealist, you have realist, and neo-realist. You know, the idealist, they are involved in wishful thinking. And you see, I have also wishful thinking. I wish all people would think the same, but this would never come about. Yeah? People coming from different civilizations would never think the same, because they are different, and they will continue to be this. And this has been the history of mankind, and we have to acknowledge this. So this is realism. So the realists, they go from hard facts and consider only hard facts, and they are little concerned about ethics. And I am concerned about ethics, and that's why the concept of neo-realism is more appealing to me. I belong to the school of neo-realists, so my wishful thinking is that with all people belonging to the divergent civilization will have similar worldviews, but this is not feasible, and that's why I think we have to acknowledge the differences, and we say we need a consensus, and this consensus has to be minimal, because it has to come to be real. If we exaggerate it, say people have to agree on this and this, then this will be a concept. You may write a PhD thesis on it and become famous scholar, but you cannot do policy with it. I am interested in policy-oriented research, and that's why my argument of international morality relates to feasible policies, and that's why I minimize the concept and look at it as a minimal consensus shared by all civilizations. In my view, the idea of human rights and the ethics related to it lie at the heart of the international morality touched upon. In addressing an international morality based on human rights, and democracy, I want to focus my pondering on Islam. My first point is that an international morality accepted by all civilizations has to be secular, in the restricted meaning of a separation between religion as an ethical belief and politics. There are some secularists who want to throw away with religion. I do not share this understanding of secularism. I reduce the concept of secularism to a separation between politics and religion. And I consider religion as a major source of ethic. But it is an ethic on a personal level. It is not it is not an ethic that should be imposed on people through a police. It is an ethic that people internalize through their education, and so I am against overwhelming secularism, and I reduce secularism to a separation between religion and politics, and I continue to look at religion as a source of ethical concept. It did not exist earlier, so it did not exist in Islam, it did not exist in Christianity, in Judaism, or in any other religion or civilization. The concept of human rights is a concept that came into being, I mean, in the course of 18th century, and it is very much related to the concept of natural law. And the concept of natural law is secular. When this concept, I mean, it is clearly, I mean, we would be dishonest if we would say it is not a European concept. It is a European concept. Yeah? And this concept, I mean, in the 19th century, the 19th and the 20th century were the centuries of westernization of the world. So if you look, for instance, at the history of the Ottoman Empire, the history of modernizing the Ottoman Empire, and also the history of the establishment of the Republic of Turkey, was these were processes of adjusting non-Western entities to Western development, and this era is now coming to an end. Yeah. So I mean, the Westernization of the world is being now challenged, and so that's why in earlier period of this process of the Westernization of the world, there was no challenge. I mean, if you look at the establishment of the United Nations, and if you study the Charter of the United Nations, I mean, we have to be honest and acknowledge most of the principles indicated in the Charter of the United Nations, they come from Western culture. If you study the Declaration of Human Rights that was, agreed upon in San Francisco, 1948, it is Western natural law. And I mean, Islamic countries, except Saudi Arabia, they all, all existing Islamic countries at the time, and non-Western countries, they gave their consent to that International Declaration of Human Rights. Now, I was in June 1993. I was in Vienna attending the UN Conference for Human Rights, and there I was able to witness what I am addressing here as the Westernization of the world. So people from non-Western civilizations, not only from the Islamic civilization, were challenging the universality of human rights. They say, you have your own human rights and we have our human rights. So we want to develop our own concept of human rights, and this is de-Westernization means here challenging the universalism or the universal validity of Western concepts, norms and values. And here I'm asking, it is true. We have, we Muslims, we have to acknowledge that the source of the concept is Western, natural law, but this doesn't mean that this concept is only valid in Europe. So we have to work on the concept, we have to reformulate the concept, and we have also to ponder about the issue, how can we, to repeat what I have said earlier, how can we make Muslim people speak the language of democracy and human rights in their own tongue? And therefore, in this period, in this very critical period of de-Westernization of the world, of course there are many avenues. As a professor of international relations, I teach my students, and also in Ankara, but I continue what I did and do at Harvard and at my German university in Göttingen. I teach my students the fact that if something going on, there is no determinism. There are several scenarios, and there are several avenues, and humans are free to select one of the avenue. So the present situation, these are the hard facts, is decline of the West politically and economically, but this is a long-term process. But in terms of values and norms, the universality of Western concepts is being challenged, and this is going on rapidly. And this covers also democracy and human rights. And so the avenues there, one avenue is, I want to restrict myself just to two scenarios. One scenario could be the de-Westernization goes on, and every civilization underlies the fact that it has its own norms and values. We say, we do not need your norms and values, we have our own. So and a politicization of this goes on, and the result would be what I call, I wrote this book in Berkeley, and I'll tell you why Berkeley is very important for this. I was last year visiting professor in Berkeley, California, and I wrote my book in German, Krieg der Zivilisationen in Berkeley, and I define war of civilization not as a military war. It is, I call it in German, Krieg der Weltanschauungen. It is a war of Weltanschauungen. The term exists in English and French, and it means worldviews. It's a war of worldviews, conflicting worldviews. This book could become military, but not necessarily, but this separates humanity. This is one scenario. The westernization of the world, the abolishment and demise of universalism and all universal values, and the contention that each civilization has its own norms and values, and then you have this conflict. This is one scenario. The other scenario is the one that I have been trying to elaborate on in my paper, and I have named it International Morality. People of different civilizations, civilizations as I said are regional, cross-cultural, uniting similar cultures like Islamic civilization uniting thousands of local cultures. People of different civilization and cultures, they come together, they pursue a culture, intercultural and inter-civilizational dialogue, and they refer to reason. On the basis of reason and rationalism, it is possible to talk to one another, and they formulate a minimal consensus, a house order, if you want, for making, to guarantee that humanity can live in peace with one another. And let me finish this presentation in confronting you with the nightmares I had in Berkeley last year, and that was also the background of this book. Berkeley is a real multicultural society. In Berkeley, 40% of the students in Berkeley come from East Asia, from different East Asian communities. About 15% from different Middle Eastern countries, and about 10% Hispanics, and the rest are what you call Anglo-Saxon. Yeah? And even those students who come from East Asia, 40% of the students come from East Asia. They are organized in 25 student organizations in Berkeley, and they dislike each other. The Cambodians do not like the Vietnamese, and the Vietnamese do not like the Laotians. And you have what I call war of civilizations. I witnessed this war of civilization on the campus of Berkeley, and when it's dark in the campus of Berkeley, it is dangerous to walk. And those people are not differing only in terms of norms and values. They do not only have different worldviews, but they also fight against one another. And you see, looking at Berkeley, and the idea of multicultural society is belied in Berkeley. If you go to Berkeley, say it is not working. I mean, this is a small world. It's not working. If this happens on the level of world politics, then say Allah saves us from such scenario. أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. Thank you very much.
I would like to thank Professor Tibi for his most interesting lecture, which has been really very rich with his personal experiences. We appreciate that he has shared his views and ideas and his rich experience with us. I think we have some time for to entertain a few questions, and I see a hand from over there, the first one. That, please. Yes, please.
Also, you can speak English, so I need to.
So, should we collect or should I answer each question? It's you are the chairman.
Well,
yeah.
maybe we can combine a few questions. Please.
Okay.
Please go ahead. My very small question is, I want to very kind about this, but as the Americans say, we're trying to have your cake and eat it. In other words, you're talking about de-Westernization, how you don't believe in universalism, and then you turn around and make the separation of politics and ethics a universal concept and very important. Then how do you explain all the other things you said at the beginning about, there's no universalism, the West is trying to impose concepts on the other civilizations and so forth. And yet, at the end, you end up saying, well, yes, it comes from natural law tradition, let's be honest about this, but this is universal. If one Western concept, and a very strategic one, in fact, is universal, why can't the others be universal? Why can't some concepts from Confucianism be universal? Or Islam be universal? I think your whole talk, very kind about this, is based on a very fundamental contradiction. Okay. Postmodern
Maybe we can take another third question and then we'll ask the speaker to answer and then we carry on. Buyurun efendim.
So,
Bir
okay.
dakika.
Yeah.
Türkçe konuşanlar buraya gelsinler efendim.
Kendileri de inandıklarını belirttiği Kur'an-ı Kerim'de kendilerinin de inandıklarını belirttikleri Kur'an-ı Kerim'de Allah bu Kur'an'a inanan Müslümanları başka kanun koyma mercilerine boyun eğmemekle görevlendiriyor ve bunu emrediyor birçok ayette ve bu kanunlara yani Allah'ın sizin şeriat diye anlattığınız şey Allah'ın kanunlarını ifade ediyor bence. Buna uymayanların Müslüman olamayacağını Kur'an-ı Kerim'de belirtiyor ve hedefi cennet olan bir Müslüman bu Allah'ın dediğine karşı gelerek sizin anlattığınız biçimde karşı gelmiş olacak. Sizin anlattığınız demokrasi kavramı bana çok soyut geliyor ayrıca. Bu kavram içinde İslam'ı nereye koyuyorsunuz? Ve İslam demokrasiyle değil diğer ideolojiler ve siyasi düzenlerle de uzlaşmadığını Kur'an-ı Kerim'de belirtiyor. Buna inanan bir Müslüman sizin anlattığınız şekilde başka kanun koyma mercilerine boyun eğemez. Bunun
I would like really to ask Professor Tibi before we go with more questions that he can, if he like, of course, to address some of these questions.
I mean, I know Canada as well. I know Calgary. I spent some time in Toronto and other Canadian cities. But if you look at Toronto, Toronto is a combination of ghettos. Yeah, I mean, physically, in many other terms, I find Toronto as a major Canadian city is a combination of ghettos, and I do not find there people who really understand themselves as Canadian identity. And this happens to me now. You see, in Berkeley, maybe Berkeley is even. I mean, the development there is more progressed than in Canada. But it's the issue is that people do not share the very same identity as related to the state citizenship. Yeah, and so I had in my classes and some students. There's a student who complained about me in a lecture because I said in the lecture I was not saying my view. I'm just referring to American history. See, Thomas Jefferson as a founding father of America, and somebody complained about me, filed a written complaint about me that this is an offense. Yeah, say this is I do not believe from my point of view. I mean, the students argued Thomas Jefferson is not, for me, is not the founding of America, because this is a racism. This is a white male racism, or what you call it. Canada cannot be referred to as an example for a society where these issues have been resolved. And my American colleague Schlesinger has published a few years ago a book about the disuniting of America. And this disuniting of America is the present problem. You see, earlier when people migrated to America, America was believed to be the melting pot. But now people are disillusioned and say this melting pot was in a limited way. It was there, very limited, but not even this limited way is now sustainable. And then you have Graham Fuller, who's coming to Ankara next week, the American analyst, is saying, he's talking about the Libanization of America. Yeah. So because if you politicize these differences, and if you politicize the disuniting of America, and you have as a result the Libanization of America. You see, the problem, the scarf is not the problem. I mean, the veil is a problem. You see, if you consider this as very important for you, then I have to accept this, and I do accept this. Yeah, my mother is also veiled, and I accept this. Yeah. You see, but the issue is not the scarf. These are, not so meaningful things. The issue is to agree on norms and values and share it, despite the difference in religion and the belonging of a civilization. This is the issue. You know, how can we agree on norms and values that help us live together in peace? This is the issue. Yeah. Neo-realist, not neo-idealist. Neo-realist. Yeah. You remember in my presentation, because you blamed me for having a focus on Islam, because my lecture was on Islam. But while I was speaking, remember I referred to my experience in India, and how I was dialoguing with Hindus, and I was asking Hindus, you cannot impose your Hindu worldviews on Muslims, and the very same in Bosnia. I mean, this is the problem in Bosnia is that the Serbs are imposing on Muslims, and also on the Croatians, they are imposing on them their concept. And if you do that, you have war. And you see, I am a peace researcher, and I'm concerned about peace. And I agree with you maybe in one point. I am aware of the fact I'm presenting a concept, and you are addressing the feasibility of the concept. Yeah, yeah. And
would you kindly deal to the chair, because if we carry on this discussion, we will end with the dialogue, and there is another question raised by the gentleman here, and then we have a limited time for that question.
So okay, so this maybe this helps me to move to the second question. I am aware of the fact, to summarize it, I'm aware of the fact what I have presented, my concept of international morality, it is a concept, and I believe it is a feasible concept, and I try to limit the concept as possible, to the extent possible. I limit my concept to the extent possible. But you see, if we come to the conclusion this is not possible, then the alternative is war. May I? Yeah, I'm moving now to your question. I've just finished that question. You see, we had a project years ago at the Norwegian Institute of Human Rights, and the Norwegian Institute of Human Rights is sponsored by the Norwegian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, and we agreed, and there were many leading human rights activists from the Muslim world, among others Abdullah Abdul Naim, the Sudanese, Mohammed Arkoun, and we agreed that the problem with the concept of human rights in Islamic societies is that there is no cultural underpinning of this concept. Like when you talk about human rights of Sudan, people say this concept is coming from the West and it has no legitimacy and no underpinning. And this is a description. I mean, and somebody who say this is not true, I will say he's not knowledgeable. He or she, I mean, because if you say it has a cultural underpinning, say, I mean, please go there and look at the things, yeah. But if you agree, I mean, or if you see the things as they are, the culture. Would you please listen? I'm answering your question. It is impolite. I mean, simply impolite. In terms of my culture, it is an impolite response. If you don't want, I don't. Okay, I move to the third question. Yeah, so the okay. I mean, the Prophet says, وَعَمِلُهُمْ بِمَا هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. I mean, be to them better than they are. Yeah. So I follow this. I follow this, and you see, the culture underpinning is missing, and we agreed. Like, I mean, leading. I am a founding member of the Arab Organization of Human Rights. I mean, please consider this also. Yeah. I mean, my colleagues like Muhammad Arkoun, Saadeddin Ibrahim, and Abdullah Naim, we said the issue how to establish a culture underpinning acceptable to the people, and the people should not feel this is imposed on them. This is the issue. And I mean, how to deal with this, and then you have to refer to your own culture, and that means I try to establish the concept of human rights in Islamic societies in studying Islam and looking at Islam. Where can I find elements of Islam within which I could support this argument? And this is what I mean when I talk how to make Muslims speak the language of human rights in their own tongue. So in this way, I mean, you come, for instance, you say torture is a violation of human rights. But how to legitimize the concept that torture is a violation of human rights? It is possible to legitimate this with Islamic arguments, or with Hindu arguments, or with Confucian arguments. Well, in the result, you are right. At the result, you see, there is a common understanding between cultures and civilizations that torture is a violation of human rights. But the underpinning of this argument is not universal. The underpinning, I legitimate this argument with reference to Islam and not to natural law. This is the issue. If you don't do this, people will not accept it. You see, intellectuals who have studied in Paris and in Harvard and New York, they come and present their ideas, and this will not be accepted. This is the issue. And to the third question, you see, you are right in saying the Sharia. I mean, the Sharia, as I mean, the Quran says we have given you a Sharia and follow it. And if you don't follow it, then you are not a Muslim. I agree with you with this. But what does this Quran mean when Sharia is here is referred to? The Sharia it is a source of ethic. You see, Sharia as a state order, or as a legal order, it did not exist when the Prophet was acting in Medina. There was no legal order that you call the Sharia. Study Islamic history, and you find this. And the Sharia was developed. Starting with the 8th century. Islam was established in the 7th century, and the madahib, the legal schools in Islam, they were established between the 8th and the 9th century. And even at the time, the Sharia was community-oriented, and you have, I don't understand Turkish, but the words, they are similar in Arabic. You have been talking about political system. There is no such thing in the Quran as a political system or political order. This is a reading of 20th century language into the Quran. And so I do follow the Sharia, and therefore I am a Muslim, but I follow it in the understanding the Sharia is a concept of ethics, is a concept of al-amru bil-ma'ruf wa nahy anil munkar, and the following Islamic precepts, but the Sharia is not codified. It has never been codified, and it will never be codified because it is impossible. Sharia is based on interpretative law. And therefore, Sharia is an ethic for Muslim to follow it, and it is binding for them to follow it. But you see, if you don't follow the Sharia, God will punish you. It is not the police which will punish you; it is God who will punish you. And this is the understanding of the Quran. Yeah?
I think here it happens that as we do in Turkish, always there are some misconception about the word Sharia. I think we have to distinguish between law, jurisprudence, and Sharia.
Exactly.
And but I'm not saying that I am endorsing the ideas of the speaker on this, but I'm saying that what I would like that we are using the word Sharia, particularly in the modern connotation in daily life, in a very wrong way. So I think one should not mix concepts between the law, jurisprudence, fiqh, and Sharia. Otherwise, we will, mix things together. I think we can entertain another question, or yes, please.
Yeah.
I think everybody is fed up with that, and
Well, this is propaganda, yeah. This is, yeah. Yeah. Yeah. Well, each religion has its morality. So there is an Islamic morality, and I have not been denying that. I mean, if you have heard of my presentation that I'm denying that there is Islamic morality, then it is a misconception. So it is each religion has its morality. So I mean, I was not discussing this. I was discussing the issue: how can people who come from different religions and different civilizations live together? So Islamic morality applies to you and to me, but it does not apply to a Christian or to a Hindu. So I need to live with, you see, we are living in a global society. I mean, people of different civilization live together. For determining the interaction between civilizations, it is not possible to refer to one morality. And so the concept of international morality does not deny the existence of local morality concepts which refer to one or the other civilization. However, on the level of interaction or living together between civilizations, you need a concept which goes beyond religion, because what is acceptable for you and for me as a Muslim is not acceptable for a Hindu or for a Buddhist. And then how can we work and live together in peace? So this is the issue. The second thing, you have been trying to reduce the problem to my individual problem as a person living between two civilizations. You see, I'm teaching in Ankara, and this is not the very first time I teach in an Islamic country. I've been teaching in the last 15 years in many Islamic and African countries. I taught also in non-Islamic countries, like I taught in Nigeria, in Lagos, I taught in Cameroon. And you see, my students in Ankara, to stay with Ankara, my students in Ankara, some of them have never been to the West, never, yeah? But they live the very same problem, because we live in an age of globalization. So you cannot say, because I'm living in Germany and I experience this probably in a more sharp way than others, but probably you experience the same too. I mean, my Turkish students in Ankara do experience this clash of worldviews and civilizations, even though they are living in Ankara, never been to the West. The last thing about fundamentalism, you are right. You see, if you look at Western media equate fundamentalism with terrorism. And fundamentalism is not only terrorism. Fundamentalism is a worldview. It's a Weltanschauung. It is a concept of the world, and it is not. There are Islamic fundamentalists who are terrorists, but maybe 5% or even less of them. But fundamentalism is not a terrorism. And this, in the American Academy of Arts and Sciences, and the fundamentalism project that we have been running, for those who are interested, it's published in 3 volumes by Chicago University Press. Fundamentalism Observed, Fundamentalism and Society, Fundamentalism and the State. And we have shown in the concept how misleading the coverage about fundamentalism in the media. And it is important to enlighten the people, and that's why we run the project to explain fundamentalism in a scientific way, and also to make this known to the people, and to show that the misperception about fundamentalism in the media is very misleading. So these are the 3 questions.
Well, I really thank Professor Tibi for his contribution, and I think though we missed a lot of his paper, particularly the part on democracy, we have really gained a lot of his experience and his views, and this kind of sincere discussion, open discussion, I think it contributes also to the to understanding of very sensitive subject. I think there has been an overwhelming reaction all over the world to the idea or the theory of Professor Huntington, and I think it's time to forget about it now, because it's totally unscholarly idea, and it's full of mistakes of history, which I'm sure any student of history will just find it out through his first reading. But I think what is there, that the problem is not only in the Muslim world. I think the problem is in the Western world as well, because I think in the Western world now, after this, the end of the dipolar world, balance between the Soviet power and the Western power, by the diminishing and the collapse of the Soviet Empire, I think there is a growing feeling that the West is lost its balance, and now these kind of theories are trying to find another counterpower to balance the Western world. And I think, being a Muslim, being a student of the Muslim civilization, I think Islam is the wrong address, because many of the ideas which is considered to be modern ideas has been there in Islam and practiced by the Muslims. Take, for instance, the coexistence. I think not only in this country, but in the whole Muslim world, this cultural, ethnic, religious coexistence has been practiced for centuries. Even where the Muslims were in the climax of their might and their power, when they were the only governing power on earth, during the Abbasid, the Umayyad, the Ottomans, they were wazirs, they were ministers, they were state people, from Christians, from Jews. This palace, which is one of the Caliph's palace, knew Jews, Armenians, Greeks working for the Caliph of the Muslims, you see. So the coexistence in the Muslim world is not a problem. I think it has been a problem in Europe, and Europe never tolerated non-Christians. Europe didn't tolerate the Muslim Arabs in Spain. Europe didn't tolerate the Jews. We have new examples for that. And now Europe is not tolerating the existence of a Muslim state in the heart of Europe. So I think one of the other side of the coin is to discuss the problem of the West in reality, in the if the West is really genuine in his preaching of human values, West Europe has to prove first that these human values are valid in its continent, and then it is to ask others to address to it. Now, I really don't know how one says de-Westernization in Turkish, but I understand the idea of Professor Tibi of de-Westernization, and I think that the West now, because of what he has described as de-Westernization, wants to find a new mission. The mission was, at the end of last century, is to teach others civilization, and now the new mission is to teach human rights. We are all for human rights, but we expect first that the West respects human rights in Islam. What is going on in Chechnya, in Bosnia, are examples.
Double standard.
And I was discussing this issue with a guest, and then he said or she said, well, but human beings are inconsistent. Okay, if human beings are inconsistent, if the Western people are inconsistent, they have to accept the inconsistency of others. If you say, I am inconsistent, so what the Serbs do in Bosnia, what the Russians do in Chechnya, is because of my inconsistency, okay, it's over. Then you cannot teach me, you cannot preach me human rights. I think this is one moral one in Professor Tibi's international morality, that we should accept that we have the same standard for things, and I'm sure with his this scholarly and very brilliant intellectual contribution, which has been enriched with his very wide, and I'm amazed with the width, with the depth and the wide spectrum of his experience, personal experience. I'm sure with all these contributions, he's going to contribute to the promotion of these ideas. I thank him, and I thank the German Cultural Institute, Goethe Institute, and the University of Boğaziçi, in person of Professor Binnaz Toprak, for giving us here in IRCICA to share this very, very important experience with us. Thank you very much. And now you are welcome not to Coca-Cola, because we've known about the sensitivity of Professor Tibakor. We invite you to chai.